to hear about some of what we're up to and to offer advice on how we can do our work in a way that is supportive of your businesses and of development. And so we have the utilities at many of these meetings. We have developers, both commercial, residential, small and large. I think it's been pretty good. And today we have projects to share with you, and you'll hear lots from our staff. But if we could maybe hear just Al, Mimi, Mike, and Craig to say hello in that order, and who you are and who you represent, and what you do, that'd be great. Al, I think you're still on your, have your mute button on.
There we are. Now can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm sitting in for Kelly Ritz today. She's over in Bend, but asked me to listen in and contribute where possible. So that's my story.
And your business is?
Land development and home building. So Stonebridge Homes.
Thanks, Al. Mimi?
Good afternoon. Mimi Dukas with AKS Engineering. Do consulting work across Tigard and have done it for a long time. So happy to be here.
Old friend of the city. Thanks, Mimi. And Mike?
Hi, my name is Mike Irwin. I'm a land acquisition manager for David Weekly Homes, and we're a home builder here based out of Beaverton, and we've had some projects there in Tigard now, so you might be somewhat familiar with the name and of David Weekly. We're operating all around the Portland Metro, Clark County, and I'm thankful to be on the committee and try and provide some thoughts and input where I can. But it's also a bit of an educational experience for me as well to be on it and learn more about what's going on. I apologize. I'm driving and I'm going to have to step off here close to 3. So I'm kind of on a temporary basis here, but glad to be here.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to have you. And Craig.
Hi, my name's Craig Shook. I'm with Riverside Homes, and I'm also happy to be part of this committee and discuss the issues. I think it's a great idea. And I'm also a Tigard resident, so I'm particularly interested in what happens in Tigard. We've built 3 projects Riverside has in Tigard, and we have an 80 lot project that's going to be before the Planning Commission here or the Planning Department shortly out in River Terrace. So we have a vested interest personally and from a business standpoint for successful city operations. So thank you.
Thanks, Craig. We appreciate that perspective, and both as a business and a resident here. All right, a lot to share today. So Tom, why don't you take it away?
Okay, well, welcome everybody. I'm Tom McGuire, I'm the Assistant Community Development Director. And Kenny mentioned it has been a long time since we've had a meeting with this committee. It's been over a year, and not to take up too much time, but the last meeting we were kind of finishing several projects, and you were getting some code update projects, and you had some chances to get involved in that and provide us commentary on those code projects. So in addition to the COVID kind of shutting everything down for the last year, we've also been retooling, so to speak. We've got several new major legislative projects that just started up this year. And we've got them now to a point where I think we can make some good presentations to you and get you some information that you can react to and get you up to date on where things are going. Before I kick it over to Susan, maybe just Teams form and etiquette. We'll just use the same format that we do with City Council and the Planning Commission, and have folks that aren't speaking go to turn off camera, and then if you have questions or we will have Q&A sessions after each briefing, but if you have questions or an issue or you want to bring something up, use the hand raising and we will monitor that. So I think, unless there's other questions, I'm not seeing anything, so I think we'll move forward. And Susan, you are first up.
Great. Well, thank you, Tom. I'm assuming people can hear me. Maybe just a head shake from Tom. Can you hear me? Great. Okay. So my name's Susan Shanks, and I'm a senior planner with Tigard. Been here about 7 years. Know some of you. I don't know if I know all of you, but I definitely know some of you. And really appreciate being able to present to you today on a long-range planning project that actually began in COVID and might even end in COVID. Who knows? Hopefully that won't be the case, and we can all meet together soon. But I've been working on what we're calling the Washington Square Regional Center Update Project. And this is a Metro grant funded project funded through the CET, the construction excise tax that Metro collects and then distributes back out to support projects, long-range planning projects and other kinds of projects. So we started about a year ago, pretty much when COVID just started. And I'm going to share my screen now because I have a presentation, and I'm hoping you guys can see that. And maybe if someone could shout out that they can see my screen, that would be great.
We can see it, Susan.
Thank you. So Doreen, perhaps, or Tom, if I could rely on you, if you see any hands raised when I'm sharing my screen, I don't get to see you guys, so sorry about that. It's kind of one of the downsides of virtual presentations, but and also, please, this is okay. Thank you, and it's also pretty informal. Please feel free to speak up or raise your hand and ask questions during the presentation. I think we each have like approximately 30 minutes to share with you and also hear from you. So again, thank you again for being here. So I'll start off. Again, we're doing this long-range planning project for the Washington Square Regional Center area. And to give you a project overview, essentially we began this project because essentially it was time. The last planning that was done for this area was a little over 20 years ago, and that's generally the lifespan of a long-range planning project. Or planning vision and plan. And so it was really just time. And the city had been focusing on its downtown and the Tigard Triangle, which is the city's town center area. But this is actually the city's regional center, Metro designated regional center. And it was just the right time to go back and look at what was going on here, how we could better support what was going on here, and also just given the housing and climate challenges that we're facing that have changed in the last 20 years. Certainly equity needs to be more present in all of the work that we do. So for all those reasons, we applied to Metro for this grant and have been working on it for about a year. This map just generally shows you where the Washington Square Regional Center is. I'm assuming maybe you're mostly familiar with this area. It's more than just the mall. A lot of people think like, oh, you're planning for the mall. It's like, well, the mall is actually just one property of hundreds of properties and hundreds of businesses in the regional center area. But the regional center is essentially kind of centered around Highway 217, Hall Boulevard, Shoals Ferry Road, and Greenberg. And it's actually within 3 different jurisdictions. What you can hopefully see a little bit on this map here is that it's partly in Tigard, that's the green area. It's also partly in Beaverton, that's the blue area. And it's also, there's some in unincorporated Washington County. So we've been working with all of those jurisdictions. So the goal of this project is to work with our various partners, our stakeholders, the community, to refine the original vision. We really think that there's still merit in the original vision for the regional center. But again, it's been 20 years. So many things have changed in the last 20 years with regard to how we shop, with regard to how we work, with regard to even how we travel. So we want to be able to facilitate more housing. That's one of the things that hasn't really happened here, but more housing, transportation, and business employment options that are consistent with Tigard's strategic vision, and that's to be a walkable, healthy, and more inclusive community. We've been working with the stakeholder working group, all virtually. It's a very large group because because the area is very multi-jurisdictional for one, but it's also just a very large area. It has a lot of businesses of all different kinds. It is a diverse small residential area in it as well. So we've been working with the county, we've been working with TriMet, with ODOT, because ODOT has facilities through this area. We have a large consultant team with different specializations. We've been working with community organizations that work in this area, provide service in this area, as well as with business owners and operators. We do have a project website if you're at all interested. It's our Tigard kind of web address, which is tigard-or.gov, and then it's just / the square. So if you're interested, check it out. There's a lot of documents on there of the analysis we've been doing, and there'll be more information we'll be posting shortly. And so this is where we're at in the project. We're kind of halfway through, maybe a little bit further than halfway. We started out doing your kind of very typical things you do in a project like this, where we were documenting existing conditions and understanding the area. We were evaluating opportunities in the area, needs as well as challenges. And now we're in the place where we're developing future land use and transportation scenarios as refinements for the vision here. And we're just about to we have a set of draft recommendations that we're just about to bring to the broader community in an online open house. And then we'll be developing our final recommendations and bringing those forward to our Planning Commission and City Council. And I expect that we'll be doing that in the summer of this year. So some background and conditions. And actually, I'm just going to pause right there for a second just to see if anybody had any questions or comments.
Actually, I have a question. This is Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Hi. I was looking at when you had your map up that showed, and you don't have to go back to it, but when you had your map up that showed the
Yep.
There's a significant portion of that area that's Washington County.
Yep.
Is there an advantage for an applicant to annex some of that property into Tigard, or does that come up? I know it does in residential from time to time, so I was curious about that.
Yeah, actually, so I have probably a better map that's more zoomed in that I'll show you later. And that's a really good question. The city is not like the area that is in the regional center that is in Washington County is actually in Tigard's planning service area. And so in that area, properties along that edge have been annexing voluntarily over time. And presumably they're annexing because it's either services that they need or want, and or they prefer the regulations that the city of Tigard has for allowing them to develop. And so we don't have a requirement to annex in this area, in the Metzger area is what this neighborhood is called. But properties have been doing it over the years for various different reasons. And it's really up to a property owner as to whether or not they think that there is more benefit based on the differences in regulations in the county versus in the city.
I see. Okay.
Sometimes I think the only properties need to annex if, for example, they're on septic and they need to redevelop, they would actually need to be on sewer. And that's one of the reasons why they would need to annex to the city is to be on city sewer. But I think in this area, I don't know if many properties are on septic, if any.
One other question on this schedule that you're on. Have you had good success and made progress by using the virtual meeting format, or has it been it's hard for all of us to get used to, but it's quite the project to have to be virtual all the time.
Oh, well, this is just one of many long-range planning projects that we're doing virtually. We're updating our TSP. We're doing another UGB expansion area. You'll hear from Skylar about that, and another. Right. So yes, it has its challenges, certainly, and especially when COVID first happened and we were all adjusting to this new reality. It was hard, but it's gotten better. And like I said, our stakeholder working group, I actually think it's worked better than I thought it would. One of the reasons being is that you can break out into smaller groups, which is nice. But also you can have simultaneous language interpretation, which has been great because in this part of Tigard, the residential portion of the regional center is very racially diverse, culturally diverse. And so we've been able to have like simultaneous language interpretation with all of our meetings, which has just been wonderful. So there have been some benefits.
That's great.
But it is hard not to connect with people, in person for sure.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay, so moving on to background and conditions. Hopefully some of you are familiar with this area. If not, this is an aerial photo showing the area. This area probably maybe is no surprise to you. It's mostly developed with commercial buildings and has commercial activity in this area. Those are all the white-topped, white-roofed, large buildings that you see here. As you may know, it contains Washington Square Mall, which is about 100 acres in and of itself. It has the Washington Square Transit Center. It's a regional transit center. It has Redtail Golf Course, which is actually a City of Portland owned property, but it's in Beaverton. And we checked in with them at the beginning of this project to see if there was any chance they would be redeveloping in the next 20 years or so. And the answer was nope, not yet. But they're interested, but it's still very much in the future for them. There's a West Station in the area on the west side of 217. Fano Creek, and actually I'll use my cursor. Fano Creek runs along the whole western edge of the area, which has the Fano Creek Regional Trail. There's the heavy rail line that goes through here, which has the West Station. And then Lincoln Center is down here on the other side of the street from the mall, which actually has the tallest building in Washington County, which is Lincoln Tower at 12 stories. And then in the middle of this residential area over here is the Metzger Elementary School. There is very little vacant land in this area. It's been largely developed for decades now. So that's one of kind of the challenges here is like what kind of redevelopment is possible here. This is a zoning map of the area. And one of the things that is really key to understand about this area is that when the planning was done for it over 20 years ago, the vision was for a high density vertical mixed use district. So that's what the vision for it was for, because this is a regional center. Essentially that's what then Tigard zoned it for. So what I've pointed out here is some key regulations that go along with that aspiration. So the area that I've circled with the largest oval, which is a lot of the regional center that's within Tigard, is actually zoned for a minimum of 2-story buildings, and this is when there's new development, but a maximum of 200-foot tall buildings. So there was a lot of expectation that this area would go very vertical. I mean, that's about 20 stories. And like I said, Lincoln Tower is at 12 stories, and that's the tallest building in all of Washington County. It has a floor area ratio minimum of 1.25. And then if a development project actually proposed residential development, it has a minimum of 50 units per acre as the minimum requirement. So again, very dense. You have to go vertical to hit all of those standards. And then in the smaller area I've circled, which is more of a mixed use residential zoned area, it also has a minimum 2-story height, but a lower maximum height of 75 feet, but still a very high residential density of 50 units per acre as a minimum. So, again, this area was really zoned for, again, high density vertical mixed use development almost everywhere in this like 900 to 1,000 acre area. And that's important to bear in mind as we work through the key findings and then our final draft recommendations. So this is just a graphic to show you, like, there's a lot of jobs here, a lot, and they're not all retail. You think, oh, the mall's there, like it's all retail. It's like, no, there's actually more technical and professional jobs. And that's kind of all through the Nimbus and Cascade area on the west side of the freeway. So about 1,000 businesses in total and about 15,000 jobs in total are in this area. Now, granted, these are 2018 numbers from Oregon employment data. COVID, don't know what's going to happen after COVID, but this is the data that we had that was the most recent at the time when we were doing this analysis. In terms of who lives here, and that's that small residential neighborhood, kind of more on the right-hand side or to the east of Greenberg Road. And like I said just briefly before, it's a very diverse residential population compared to the city of Tigard as a whole. It has a lot more Black or African American people living here, 22% based on, again, the most recent data we could get at the time. And there's more renters than owners compared to the rest of the city. So we've done a lot of market and feasibility analysis to understand what's going on in this area, what can we expect. This is just a list of all the different things that we've done. We've done a market analysis, looked at different feasibility of different kinds of developments at different scales. We've looked at non-conforming development, of which there's quite a bit here. We looked at what kind of residential risk displacement might happen as a result of redevelopment in this area. We've looked at our zoning code to understand what barriers exist to the kind of development that wants to happen. And we actually also worked really closely with both TriMet and the mall owners to talk about transit-oriented development opportunities. And so I'm just going to kind of briefly go through some of our market study highlights. I don't expect you to actually be able to read these graphics. This is to kind of show you on the left-hand side of your screen that we took a kind of a very a nuanced approach to evaluating the market conditions and opportunities in this area by looking at sub areas. And that's what all the different colors of the map are showing you on the left-hand side. Because honestly, this area is very large. Like I said, it's about 1,000 acres. And because of the large roads and the heavy rail that kind of divides up this area and the development, like long-standing development pattern, the regional center is no one thing. It is actually many different things. There's, kind of your business office park areas. You've got this strong mall retail area. You've got a residential area. You've got the Lincoln Center, which is a very different kind of development than what you see elsewhere. You've got a golf course. So there's all these different sub areas. And so that's the level that we looked at. We look at what kind of vacant lands were in the area. We looked at where there were vacant buildings. And this is what's showing you on the right-hand side of the screen here. And we also kind of looked at, where there are the big parking lots, where is the potential for infill development on existing parking lots, and where is there just potential for redevelopment based on other factors, based on market demand, amongst other things. And what you'll see on the right-hand side is with those circles, those ovals, those are the areas where we feel like, based on the analysis, that there was more potential for redevelopment than other areas within the regional center. And then some of those kind of bluish purple shaded lots, those are specific sites where there was definitely redevelopment potential, usually because either the building itself was underutilized or vacant. So again, not much vacant land in this area, but there are some areas where there still is infill development potential or redevelopment potential. What we learned also, the demand for new construction, there's definitely still a high demand for a new construction of new housing of many different types, row houses, detached houses, apartment developments, things like that. There's also a strong demand for car dealerships because of its location to 217. But as you might expect, there's less of a demand for offices, certainly big offices. There's also less of a demand for retail, as you can imagine, and new flex or light industrial large buildings. Again, pretty much because there's a lack of vacant land. In terms of what we found is actually feasible. So there's the demand side, but then there's like what's feasible based on, existing construction costs, existing regulations, things like that. And similar to what's in demand, what's feasible is more residential, specifically standalone residential, with mixed-use residential being somewhat less feasible than standalone residential. And then as you start getting into things with structured parking or small office or commercial buildings, it becomes less and less and less feasible. And that's primarily because of our parking standards, amongst other things. So we learned from our market study that there is definitely potential for new housing to continue to infill this area. The retail market is definitely changing. This was occurring even before COVID. We're obviously we're still all waiting to see what happens post-COVID. And then employment areas are in transition. And you'll actually hear a lot about that when Hope talks to you about the project we're doing to rezone and look at our employment lands area. And we're seeing it in the regional center as well, that there's just businesses are evolving and they're wanting to locate in this area, obviously for its kind of probably its location, but for the types of buildings that exist that offer, kind of flex space for them. And there's also potential for mixed use development, not necessarily everywhere, but at or near the mall property. So again, just remembering what I said before about the zoning and the aspirations for this area 20 years ago was to have mixed use development, very vertical, dense mixed use development everywhere. What we found through the market study and feasibility analysis is that we really don't expect mixed use development everywhere. We expect to see it more at or near the mall property. And actually, sorry, before I move on from this slide, this actually is an image of an actual approved land use proposal that the mall property owners obtained approval for actually last year. Maybe it was even in 2019, that anyway, they got approval for, and they would have actually been under construction with this new development, but for COVID. They would have been constructing this last summer. And so this is in the southern part of the mall area. There'll be another image that kind of gives you a little bit more context soon. But 217 is down at the bottom of this image, just for reference. And so what this is showing you is where the old Sears building is. This is what the mall envisions replacing it with, is multiple buildings, a mix of entertainment, hotel, some retail, more restaurant space, and hopefully housing in phase 2. So we hope that they go through with this, but like I said, COVID threw everybody for a loop, including this particular development. So one of the reasons why we know that there is obvious potential for mixed use development here is because this has actually already gone through a land use approval process. So as for key findings, just so you know, because the City of Tigard is leading this project, but as I said at the beginning, this area is within 3 different jurisdictions. So even though we've been sharing our analysis with Washington County and with Beaverton, where we have land use authority is limited to those properties that are within Tigard. So we're focusing on what we call these 3 sub areas. The Nimbus Cascade area, which is in purple and to the west of 217. The mall area, which is in red in the middle there. And the Metzger area, which is a very diverse area, both its residential population, but just even the types of businesses along Greenberg as well as along Hall Boulevard, and that's in yellow on the right side of your screen there. So that's where we're focusing kind of now our draft recommendations and kind of really synthesizing the key findings. So one key finding, no surprise, there are a lot of transportation barriers in this area that have been there a long time that really impact the cohesiveness of this area. And that's why, we obviously there's what we call these different sub areas. So, there's the heavy rail line, there's Fano Creek, there's Highway 217. Those are all kind of mostly north-south running. And they've really created barriers for connectivity, especially not just vehicles, but certainly peds and bikes. And then you've got these big roads. You've got Shoals Ferry Road, you've got Greenberg, and you've got Hall Boulevard going in and around through this area. And those roads have actually very limited crossings and incomplete sidewalk and bike lanes. And so, again, they really create barriers for people to easily move around, especially as you're aspiring for a place to be much more walkable and dense. These transportation barriers really hinder that from happening. So that was a key finding. The other key finding was, and this again was no surprise to us, that this area not only has is really deficient in parks and public open space, it also just lacks access to the parks and public open spaces that do exist. And so the reason why I'm showing you this aerial with with some of these areas X'd out in blue is that people might look at this and say, like, or even when they're driving by on Greenberg Road, they'd be like, oh, there's this lovely green space over there that the mall wraps around. So here's the mall over here, and it wraps around this green space here. Well, this is a private cemetery, so that's not, a public park happening there. I mean, granted, it is actually kind of generally open space, but it's not available for public use for any kind of recreation. And then down here, this other X, that's actually over the Metzger Elementary School property. We were talking with the school district at one point about using the school fields for a community park, but that hasn't come to pass as of yet. We don't know if it will. And then down here, it's like, oh, look at those big open green fields. Either that could be great new development, or that could be, open recreation area. Those are actually, that's a large wetland down there, and most of that land is not developable, and it's also under private ownership. So the areas that are in the regional center that you might think would be open space or recreation area or park space are not. And the closest parks are outside of the area, just slightly. So you got Metzger Park over here. So basically the circles, the green circles with P in them, are either existing parks or future parks. So you got Metzger Park, which is a long-established park in this upper right corner, but Hall Boulevard is basically the barrier to access it. We've got a future park down here that the city will be developing in a couple years, but again, it's on the other side of Hall Boulevard. We've got another future park down here that the city will be developing, but it's on the other side of Highway 217. And then obviously Highway 217 being a barrier. Previous planning efforts looked at a crossing connecting the mall to Nimbus. The red areas all over this map, the red arrows all over this map are actually areas that we're looking into if we can do improved crossings of these major roads for either all modes of travel or at the very least peds and bikes. And so, over 217, Greenberg and Hall Boulevard, those are all areas that we're taking a closer look at to improve access both to existing parks, but potential trailheads that are further to the south. And again, with an eye towards the future of really trying to see this area develop into a much more walkable area, and have better access to transit as well. This is that image of the Sears redevelopment site that I said I would provide another image that gave you a little bit more context. So this is that. So on the left-hand side, you have the mall, and the red circle is around the old Sears building. And on the right-hand side, again, the mall, and the red circle is actually showing where the new development is approved to go in the future. And one of the things that we learned, which is obviously a pretty key finding, is that the mall has the most potential, the biggest opportunity for transformative change for the mall property itself, but for the regional center as a whole. And we kind of did this thought experiment with the mall owners as well as with TriMet to kind of show how much potential is here. And the mall owners, they know this, and they're actually working on another master plan for a different northern area of the mall property. But this image actually really kind of both startled them and excited them at the same time. So essentially our consultant took an image of the Pearl District, which is on the right-hand side, and an image of the mall, which is on the left-hand side. These images are both at the same scale. They put them side by side, and then they put them together. So this actually shows you that, 12-ish blocks of the Pearl District could fit into just a portion of the mall area. We don't expect the Pearl District to show up here, just so you know, but the mall area could transform into something closer to this based on, what it currently is. And the mall is actually currently doing a master planning exercise of this area. And we're really, obviously very interested in seeing what they come up with. So that's actually just a very key finding, is that this is the part of the regional center where we feel like there could be the most transformative change. So in keeping with that, our draft recommendations to date, and I'll show you some graphics just in a moment after I kind of just briefly describe our draft recommendations, you know, one of our key draft recommendations is to basically maintain the original vision for the Washington Square Mall area in the regional center. And that is a vision that really wants to see this dense, more walkable, transit supportive mixed use development. Because we really want to recognize that's, you know, where it can really happen. And actually, even it's the vision that the mall property owners have for that area, but just the market hasn't been there yet, but it's getting closer to making this more of a reality. The other part of our draft recommendation is to kind of right size the original vision for all the other areas outside of the mall sub area. And that's really recognizing that 200-foot tall buildings are not going to happen. In the Nimbus area west of 217. It's also not going to happen in the Metzger neighborhood. We're just not going to see that kind of vertical development in other areas for the foreseeable future. And so what we want to focus on now as a refinement or as a right sizing of the vision is fostering incremental growth and change, to support housing options and to support opportunities for businesses to reuse existing buildings, where sometimes now we're saying no to businesses because the original vision also focused so much on kind of retail and office uses that it hasn't allowed kind of less impactful industrial uses. So we want to right size the vision for the remaining areas outside the mall area. And then the last thing we want to do is refine the transportation vision. The original vision had a lot of bridges, new streets, new bridges, ped bike only bridges, full streets with ped bike facilities, had 4 of them in this area, and none of them has happened. And I'm sure you can all guess why. Those kinds of improvements are ginormously expensive, and they have not happened. And so we want to take another look and actually prioritize some improvements that are achievable in the next 20 years. And the image I'm going to show you next, it's pretty close to the end of my presentation, but it's very drafty. My consultant team is working on turning these into something that we can show the broader public. But for now, you can just appreciate these very drafty images to help you visualize what I just described as our draft recommendation. So on the left-hand side was the original vision. On the right-hand side is kind of the direction that we're going for our draft recommendations. On the left-hand side, I'm just going to kind of orient you briefly. You've got Fano Creek, the squiggly line running all the way along the left-hand side, so that's Fano Creek. You've got Nimbus parallel to it, running north-south next to it. You've got the heavy rail line running north-south, kind of in the middle. You've got Highway 217 kind of coming through this area in the middle. And then you've got Greenberg Road coming up through here and Hall Boulevard on the right-hand, like kind of above, and then wrapping around on the right-hand side. So hopefully that's clear to everybody where we're at. And I'll just also point out where the mall is on this property. So the mall is right in the middle here. Okay. So did anybody have a question there? Did I hear somebody? Okay. So the solid pink area, that's where 200-foot story tall buildings are, 200-foot tall buildings or 20-story buildings were envisioned and are currently allowed by zoning. So 200-foot tall buildings, not only on the mall property, but on the east side of Greenberg and on the west side of Highway 217. So many, like hundreds of acres were envisioned to develop to that level. And then on the left-hand side, where it's like kind of the dotty hatch, or the kind of, yeah, the dotted area, that area was conceived of as being more 1 to 6 story buildings. And similarly, over on the Hall Boulevard side, in this pink hatched area that was conceived of as kind of 2 to 6 story buildings. But again, with high densities, 50 units per acre, both for the solid pink as well as for some of the hatched pink. And then if you just kind of shift your focus over to the right-hand side, you can see that the solid pink area has shrunk to primarily the mall area. And that the other side of 217, what we're proposing is to bring the height down to kind of a 1 to 6 story range. And on the kind of other side of Greenberg, looking at a range of different things, 1 to 12 stories along Greenberg, along that edge, because that's the place that contains Lincoln Tower. But further into the neighborhood, bringing the densities down. We don't have an exact number yet. We're still doing that analysis, but somewhere more in the 2 to 4 story, 2 to 6 story, 1 to 3 story range. So unusual as it may sound, because generally we don't downsize things, but we're kind of proposing more of a downsize in this area as a way to right size it for actually being successful in developing as a much more walkable, dense, and transit supportive place. So just have a couple of next steps and then I'll take questions. I think I briefly mentioned, we're taking our draft recommendations out to the broader community, doing an online open house next month from April 1st to 30th. I hope you all take a look. We want to get as much feedback as we possibly can. And like I said at the beginning of this presentation, and then we're going to be taking that community feedback, taking it back to our stakeholder working group, having one last conversation with them, and then developing our final recommendations to take to Planning Commission and City Council. And that is everything that I have.
Thanks, Susan.
Yeah, I'm going to maybe stop sharing my screen because it'd be so nice to see people, but I can always go back and share it if anybody wants to see any images. So thanks for.
We can take some questions. Also, we have, I think, a couple of other members of the committee have arrived, and we're just slightly behind time, so I'm just being a little careful with our time. So first of all, are there questions for Susan?
Yeah, this is Mike Irwin from David Weekley. Susan, first off, that was very clear, and even while I was driving, it was very easy to follow. So thank you.
Oh,
Number
good.
one. My first question really stems from, you referenced the market study, and so what I was wondering, is that an internal study, or did you retain consultants for any of the market studies?
Yep, and it's actually posted online. You could check it out if you wanted to.
Perfect. Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. That was
it.
Yeah.
Echo Northwest is our consultant who did that work.
Okay.
I don't know if you know them, but they're.
I've heard the name, but I'm not very familiar now.
Yeah, their focus is basically kind of the economic side of land use development.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Susan.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Let me know if you have any trouble finding the document, but it's all of the documents like on the website are on the right-hand column. Just scroll down and there's like 8 or so documents posted there.
Okay, great. I'll get a hold of you if I can't find it.
Yeah, please.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. Thank you, Susan. That was good.
Thank you so much. I'm going to sign out and continue my day job.
Do some.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Susan.
Really nice to see you all.
So we have a couple, before we jump into Skylar's project, we do have a couple more people who've joined us. I'm just going to call some names. Roseanne, would you mind introducing yourself and saying hello?
Good afternoon, Roseanne Johnson with the Home Builders Association of Metropolitan Portland. You may be familiar with my now former colleague, Ezra Hammer, who has transitioned from the HBA. So thank you for having me.
Welcome. It's good to have you. I see City Councilor Shaw has joined us. Welcome. And Brenda, would you mind saying a quick hello?
Hello, I'm Brenda Hartzog with Northwest Natural. Nice to see everyone.
Welcome, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Okay. Skylar's next. Skylar, would you like to? Sorry, Brenda. Didn't mean to cut you off if you were going to add more to your introduction, but.
No, I'm fine.
Okay, great. Thanks, Skylar.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Skylar Warren. I'm a senior planner here, City of Tigard, and I am project manager for the River Terrace 2.0 project, and also for a concurrent project that's related to that, our housing needs analysis update that is required as part of concept planning for urban growth boundary expansion. So I've got a lot to get through here, so I'm going to jump straight into it. But again, if anyone has a question during the course of the presentation, feel free to throw a hand up and Tom or Doreen will stop me and let me know. So locating what we're talking about here, Tigard has two urban reserves that we call Roy Rogers West and or River Terrace West and River Terrace South. They're also called Roy Rogers East and West. And they're shown here in the dark blue color. The light blue color that is just to the east of them is the River Terrace 1 area that's currently under development. And of course, Beaverton is to our north there in pink, and King City to the south. And I think many of you will know that King City has recently done concept planning for an area to their west, an area they're now calling Kingston Terrace. And that extends out along Beef Bend, out to Roy Rogers Road there, and down to the Tualatin River. So I know this group is probably more savvy than the general public when it comes to concept planning and urban growth boundaries and urban reserves and all that, but it probably bears repeating that you know, this is the first step in preparing these lands for development. We are coming up with the broad, high-level vision that's going to guide us as we take the next step with our community plan. And then, of course, individual developments will further refine that community plan. So Metro Council is going to use our concept plan to make a decision about whether they approve or don't approve an urban growth boundary expansion in this area to allow us to proceed on to that second step. This project has a lot of context, you know, particularly because it's a housing heavy focus. So we've got our Tigard Housing Options Code Amendments project that we adopted back in 2018 that informs a lot of the work. But our recently refreshed Tigard Strategic Plan focused on walkability and equity, healthy community, climate change, all of that plays into this project as well as the state changes in state law, like Senate Bill 1051, House Bill 2001, House Bill 2003, and of course others, including some that are currently in the works. We've got some concurrent projects here at the city. Our Park System Master Plan update is going on right now. Our Transportation System Plan update is going on as well. The Washington Square Regional Center Plan District update that you just heard about. Tigard Made, which you're going to hear about here in a bit. And then some external projects like the Clean Water Services Basin Planning that's going on out in this area. And like I said, the Kingston Terrace Community Plan is now progressing as well. So there's a lot going on, and while this project is not directly providing input that's adopted into these things at this stage, we do want to make sure that all these projects are aware of each other and working with each other and in concordance with each other. I want to talk briefly about the work that we've done in community engagement. I think you all are aware that it's been a difficult year all around for all of us for obvious reasons. But when we talk about community engagement in this environment, it is exceptionally challenging, and we had to adapt quickly at the outset of this project to do community engagement that was accessible and equitable to our community, because this project is planning for the entire Tigard community, and we have a diversity of cultures, races, ethnic backgrounds, languages, incomes, family sizes, access to technology. So all of that made for a really challenging landscape that we're having to do community engagement in. But I think our project team, our consultants and staff rose to the occasion. We had a community advisory committee that was consisted of 12 members. We held those meetings virtually in 2 languages. We've had 5 meetings. Our final meeting was just last night. We also have a technical advisory committee that met 4 times and will meet a 5th time here in the near future. We've had 3 virtual public open houses that have progressed some of the key questions on this project in a very public way. We held a Spanish language focus group midway through the project to really talk to that community about their needs and desires. We've sent out 27,000 postcards citywide. We've put ads in our local newspapers. We've had some podcast coverage. We did a project video, and we have a project story map. Based on all of that community engagement that we've done, we first came up with a project focus statement. And basically, this is an adaptation or an operationalization of some of the key concepts from our strategic plan that apply to this level of concept planning, mainly focused around equity and climate change, because obviously when we're doing greenfield development, we have to be careful about building in our climate change adaptation and mitigation work from the ground up. And we also want to build in equity from the ground up as well. Using that focus statement and with some really great guidance from our community advisory committee, as well as staff and the public through our public open house, we came up with a vision statement for the project. And I will read this just because I think it is good to know kind of what the project is all about. But River Terrace 2.0 is a neighborhood for everyone and a complete community. It offers housing opportunities to the full diversity of Tigard's families and households. This community is made complete by providing space for small businesses and a thriving local economy, a variety of housing options, and accessible parks and open spaces. The transportation system treats all modes equally, with walking and biking trails throughout the community, a road system that emphasizes safety and regional access, and a development pattern that supports an efficient public transit system. Public spaces and parks offer places for the community to gather. Natural areas are protected and enhanced to emphasize habitats and scenic views. Public utilities are designed to maximize cost efficiency and long-term fiscal sustainability, and the costs of necessary infrastructure are shared in an equitable manner. So one of the first things that we did was in our public open house, we put out a survey to ask the Tigard community what makes a great neighborhood, what do they love about their neighborhood now, what do they wish they could change, what really focused on housing, transportation, and commerce they look for. What we found probably not all that surprising. You know, had a heavy majority that thought Tigard needs a greater variety of housing in terms of types and prices. There's a lack of affordable housing in Tigard. There were some concerns that young families and single people can't find housing that they can afford in Tigard, so those starter homes. Cost and housing supply are two of the major factors that make it difficult to find housing in Tigard. We found out that a large percentage of people prefer to own their home rather than rent. Probably not surprising given that, you know, 80% of the survey respondents were homeowners, but we did have some renters in there. So, you know, good information to know. When thinking about a place to live, the thing that people are most looking for was safe streets and sidewalks. This is a little surprising. I mean, I think this rose to the top above some things that we probably more traditionally think people are looking for in a neighborhood, but I think this is in line with and supports the work that we've done on our strategic vision over the years. I think we're in alignment there when we know that people are looking for safe streets and sidewalks. When we ask people about public transit, what would encourage them to use it more often, they want stops closer to their home. And when they're looking for commerce in their neighborhood, they're looking for things like coffee shops, dine-in restaurants, small non-food retail shops, to a lesser degree, some personal services. And then the professional services and the big box retail, they're more interested in having within 1 to 3 miles, but still fairly close. So based on all of that, the project vision, the information that we got back from the public, from the CAC, the design team came up with 3 concept alternatives. And I'm going to blaze through these pretty fast here because I want to get us on to the preferred alternative. The first one was, you know, kind of, it's going to look familiar to you all of us. This is really kind of the more conventional style of suburban development. It's large retail center, commercial center, strip retail with a lot of surface parking surrounded by higher density or larger format housing types, and then transitioning down to smaller, lower density housing types at the edges. The second one was a Main Street corridor concept. You know, this is the more, we'll call it traditional trolley stop style neighborhood. It's more spread out. It's the same level of commercial development as in the strip center. It's just that it's spread out along this Main Street corridor. More mixed use in here. Surface parking is moved to the back, so it becomes a little bit more pedestrian friendly. Should have mentioned on that first one, transit service would be most likely at the arterials where the strip centers are. In this scenario, transit service could be at either the arterials or along the Main Street corridor. And then PED connections are coincident with the streets. So you're seeing more shared right-of-way with bike lanes, that kind of thing. The third concept was sort of like the second concept, except instead of extending out to the arterial, it is a more interior focused commercial center. So this is by necessity going to be more micro retail, very small scale personal services, like maybe a hair salon or barber shop. You might have like a very small medical office. There might be some maker spaces, flex spaces, that kind of thing, but pretty small scale when it comes to the commercial footprint. And again, you have some larger format housing here gathered around the commercial area and transitioning down to smaller format housing. So we heard pretty overwhelmingly that concept A was not preferred. There was, you know, kind of a split on concept B and C, but B came out a little bit ahead. So what we learned from that is that people wanted, they did still want a larger commercial and employment center, but they didn't want it in every neighborhood. So where it made sense was more along Shoals Ferry Road. The rest of the neighborhoods are organized around a Main Street corridor. The Main Street concept is intended to balance the livability and internal focus of the neighborhood with external connections and access. So making sure that both regional traffic can help make the commercial area successful, but also making sure that it is comfortable for the neighbors to be able to walk and bike there. We wanted to make sure that we leave flexibility in the plan for regional transportation facilities. We want to make sure that all neighborhoods achieved an average of 20 units per net acre. We wanted to make sure that there was a connection at Beef Bend that reflected and connected with the planned town center in King City, in Kingston Terrace. We want to make sure that we meet our parks level of service standard, but leave flexibility for the time being on how and where those parks are implemented. And we want to leave maximum flexibility for transit service. So this concept in the west area, it looks like this. So now that we're dialing in a little bit more to the specific geographic area, I'll give you a little context here. Shoals Ferry bounds it to the north, Roy Rogers to the east, and it goes down to about halfway between Bull Mountain and Beef Bend. So here the kind of darker purple areas, those are the commercial centers, the Main Street. And then we have 3 different neighborhood typologies. One is a Main Street emphasis, one is an even mix, and one is a feathered edge, and it's sort of a transition. I'll get into those a little bit here in just a bit. As you can see, it's intended that there would be connectivity between the throughout the neighborhood, connecting across areas that are a little bit more isolated from each other in terms of development, because there is some topography and some natural features out here that kind of create some natural breaks. And then the River Terrace South piece, you can see this kind of bold north-south line here towards the west. That is the extension of River Terrace Boulevard, and that point where it carries through down south beyond Beef Bend Road, that's the connection into Kingston Terrace Town Center. This one's bounded on the west by Roy Rogers Road, and you can see that this area is a little bit more impacted by some larger natural features. We got like a pretty large, significant wetland up in this northern part, just south of the Art Ruckin Elementary site. But again, we've got a transition from the Main Street emphasis neighborhood commercial area to the Main Street emphasis over to the even mix, and then the feathered edge along the areas where there are more significant natural features. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about what those neighborhood concepts kind of look like. And again, this is highly conceptual at this stage. This is looking at almost sort of ground truthing in a way, or doing the feasibility on these neighborhood types to make sure that they meet the standards that we have in terms of units per acre and our livability standards, and that they seem like they're meeting our livability and walkability standards as well. So all of the housing types from like single detached houses to the missing middle stuff like cottage clusters, courtyard units, quads, duplexes and triplexes, which in Tigard are considered ADUs. Those are all intended to blend together seamlessly within these neighborhoods. And that was a huge piece of feedback that we got from the Community Advisory Committee. They wanted a neighborhood that was a little bit more integrated in terms of the housing types and prices and sizes, so that there was a mix of family sizes and maybe people at different stages of life, older people who have smaller housing needs, and people who have kids at home and need larger homes, starter homes, that kind of thing. And they also were pretty clear with us that they thought there should be options for affordable units mixed in with market rate units throughout the neighborhood. They thought that was important to have an economically integrated neighborhood. They also wanted to make sure that the affordable units had access to some of the edge spaces where there were more likely to be natural resource areas, open space, and trails. And like I said, different housing types in each neighborhood. So within these, there's sort of some sub categories. Within the Main Street, there's Main Street emphasis A and B. The first one is more like townhouses, which are oriented towards the commercial node. And B is more of the higher intensity middle housing, oriented towards the commercial node, transitioning back to the lower intensity units, balancing out at the other end of the block. And then the even mix is, kind of that transitional piece between the Main Street emphasis and the feathered edge. In this one, you have the option between higher profile stacked forms of the housing and lower profile spread out forms of housing. So even mix A, you might see more quads or stacked flats, that kind of thing. Whereas even mix B, you might see more one-story courtyard units or cottage clusters, single detached houses with ADUs, that kind of thing. And then the feathered edge is really kind of looking at strategies for blending housing and the natural resource areas. So natural resource areas don't follow neat lines like, we often would like them to, I guess. And we want lot lines that are fairly regular. So the missing middle or middle housing, like cottage clusters, because they're not all required to be fee simple lots, actually offer a way for housing to better utilize some of the space along these natural areas, preventing it from becoming unused space or create odd lots or leftover space that ends up in a tract. So it does offer the possibilities for some more efficient use of land. I think I'm pretty close to time here, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the rest of these. I think it would probably be better if I just move on to the project schedule. We're right now drafting our concept plan report, so that's due to be considered by our Planning Commission and Council in late April and late May, respectively. And then we'll be going with a proposal to Metro sometime maybe in June. Sounds like it could be delayed a little bit depending on how things shake out at Metro. And we do have a couple of websites for the project. One is our Engage website. That one's updated more often. And the other is on our main city website. So I'll leave off there and take any questions and leave plenty of time for Hope to discuss her project.
Thanks, Tyler. One thing before we take questions, you say, sorry, I'm getting a feed. There, that's gone. Thanks. So one thing I just wanted to say is, in addition to the next steps that Skylar has talked about, remember this whole process. First, we have to do concept planning. So we have to submit our concept plan in some form to Metro, and we will ask in a formal ask of them to include those areas in the urban growth boundary, and they'll make a decision on that. And if it's a positive decision and we get those areas brought into the urban growth boundary, then we have to go through annexation and expanding the city boundary, and then we do community planning. And that's where the fine details happen, where we start to look at actual zoning and development standards and that sort of thing. So I know we have a lot of folks that are involved in home building on our committee. So just wanted to make sure that you understood that when we would get into those kind of fine details at the next phase, if we get a positive response from Metro in the community plan. And some of you remember the original River Terrace community plan, so that would be a similar process. So just wanted to throw that out there. And are there questions?
I have one question. This is Craig with Riverside. When you say affordable housing, what is it that you have in your mind, or what is it? Is that a subsidized housing, or is that just a different type of zone? What do you mean by affordable housing?
Both and. So we're talking about both market rate affordable housing. So in other words, not regulated. And by affordable housing there, we're meaning just something that's affordable to someone who's looking for a starter home, who might be making 80% of AMI to 120% of AMI. Often that band is called workforce housing as well. And we don't have a lot of housing for that income band yet in these areas. And we are kind of out of alignment with the distribution of housing provision in the rest of Tigard, but we're also out of alignment with the housing distribution in our neighboring communities like Hillsborough and Beaverton in some of their expansion areas. We just, for whatever reason, have gotten a lot of sort of higher end, more expensive homes in the River Terrace 1 area. So we're looking to broaden it that way. But then we're also talking about regulated affordable housing. Now, some of that would be, maybe more traditional, what you might think of as regulated affordable housing, that is apartments along the corridors where the commercial area are. Some of that could potentially be affordable home ownership through something like a community land trust. So again, that's for households that are making something like, generally 60 to 80% of the AMI, who need some help getting into home ownership. And typically that's done, they purchase the home, but the underlying land is owned by the community land trust. And it's a way to also permanently protect that affordability piece. So there's no affordability period. That home is always resold when it is resold to a family who would meet those income requirements. Does that help?
Yep. Thank you.
So Al, you've got a hand up.
Yeah. So when do you anticipate making the request to Metro to expand the UGB?
Well, somewhere between June 13th and unknown. I just had a conversation with Metro earlier today about this, trying to figure out what's going on. The mid-cycle application was originally going to be due mid-June, but we've received a communication recently from Metro that they are thinking about making an extension due to the COVID pandemic and kind of they've done this, I think, also with their regular major amendment process, as well as some of their waste related stuff. I don't understand all of that, but I think it's in alignment with what they've been doing in other regards. So it would be June, mid-June, or sometime probably shortly thereafter.
So, and the concept plan would be in place by then to make that request, or it doesn't work that way?
Yeah, the concept plan would be adopted locally first, and then the
Okay.
Metro Council would make a decision based on the merits and the, approval criteria in state law and their code.
Yeah, but potentially you see that could happen this summer or sometime thereafter, if
Yeah.
Metro cooperates on this extension.
Yes, and then we would anticipate starting the community planning process probably sometime, probably 6 months after that decision, because the decision actually comes with funding to begin the next phase.
Mhm.
And we'll actually have the luxury of time with the next phase of this project that we didn't have with this one. This one happened on a pretty short timeline.
Yeah, thank you.
So you're showing more cottage clusters, and you've had that code for a little while now. Are you getting traction within the community for the cottage clusters?
We're getting, I think, interest from some small developers. What we're hearing back, and this is anecdotal with a small sample size, but the problem right now is the financing. This, I would say the analog to this is the problems that existed in financing accessory dwelling units about 15 years ago. There was a time when, they were first legalized, that people couldn't, unless you just had a ton of home equity that you could take out, like lenders, and for that matter, tax assessors didn't know what to do with accessory dwelling units. That's finally changed a little bit. We've gotten now to the point where that's, pretty, I'm not going to say it's solved for, but there's progress being made. We're just in the infancy stage of solving for some of that with missing middle. And one of the things that we're looking at as an implementation strategy with this plan is the possibility of creating a small developer bridge loan fund or some similar kind of thing where working with some community partners, whether it's Craft 3 or someone like that, we could find a way to help make that bridge financing work to get the things constructed until such time as they can be sold. So kind of intervening in the market a little bit there. Again, that's just a high level concept we're exploring, but it's something that we'll look into more with the community plan.
We have, so far since adoption, we've approved 3 cottage cluster applications in Tigard.
And are those for sale, or are they rentals or condos, or what's the ownership structure for those projects?
Well, they've got their approval and they're searching for their financing and kind of putting that together. I think they're looking at condo.
Okay.
Other questions?
Thank you all.
Oh, Roseanne's got her hand up.
Yeah, Roseanne with HBA here. Along those same lines, is the city interested in or willing to consider other middle housing options that would be created or could be created as rental product, but allowing them to be created as fee simple home ownership product, simply by adding the common wall maintenance agreement and incentivizing those in some way? So kind of a 2-part question there.
Yeah, so that's a great question. We, I think, are open to all manner of, kind of housing options here. With the next step in this project, we'll probably look at modifying or, sort of right-sizing some of our housing option code for this particular area. And we might open it up to so quads, for example, in the rest of the city, quads are a very specific format of 2 below, 2 above. Here we might open it up to different forms of quads. In this phase, we did not get into tenure, although we intend that there would be housing for rent and ownership available in the neighborhood. But in terms of incentivizing or structure for that or anything like that, we didn't have really the scope and time to dig into it with this phase. And so we'll look at it more in depth with the next phase.
Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, thank you, Skylar. So next we have Hope Pollard and Lloyd Purdy, our Economic Development Manager, has also joined us. Lloyd hasn't said hi yet, but Hope is going to, with Lloyd's help, is going to give you a briefing on our what's called the Tigard Made project. Hope.
Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Hope Pollard. I'm an associate planner, and I'm working with Lloyd Purdy, our economic development manager, on a new project called Tigard Made. So Skylar and Susan referenced this a couple times in their projects, so I will get into it for you guys right now. So apologies, I've been having some issues with Teams these days, so it might take me just a second to load up the presentation, but I will grab this for you in just a second. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so this is Tigard Made. So we are still in the beginning stages of this project in very vision level stage and still doing our community engagement. So I'll tell you a little bit about our thoughts so far and kind of the direction we think we're headed with this project, but we're really looking to hear from you all today. So Tigard Made, this stands for Maintain, Advance, and Diversify Employment. So we are looking to maintain our existing businesses in the city, advance our zoning into the future in terms of opening it up to kind of modernize and meet current business needs, and also diversify both in terms of the types of development we see and also the employment opportunities that we offer here. And I apologize, I need to get out of this for just a second. Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. Give me just a second.
I can run the PowerPoint if you want.
Yeah, Lloyd, sorry. Would you be able to do that for me, please?
Will do. Sure thing.
Okay. Thank you, Lloyd. Okay, so sorry about that, guys. The primary thing we'll be looking at with this project is zoning and how it influences the success of businesses and development in Tigard. So similar to Susan's project, it's just about time for an update to the zoning in our employment lands. And as we've noticed through our work at the planning counter and in discussions with business owners and developers, we're just noticing it's about that time. So we're looking to modernize our code to meet the needs that we've been hearing about, including building in a stronger focus on equity and sustainability. So as a part of this project, we will also be conducting an economic opportunities analysis to estimate future job growth in Tigard. And we are about to officially hire on our consultant team to complete that economic opportunities analysis, along with an analysis of MAID-related potential zoning changes and how those might impact projected employment. Next slide, please. So these are the zones we will be looking at with MAID. You'll notice that downtown, Triangle, Washington Square are not highlighted here as they are covered by other area-specific planning efforts. But all the areas covered in red here are where zoning may change with MAID. So these are all of our employment lands, so all of our commercial or industrial lands that are not included in those other planned districts. Next slide, please. So to give you an example of where we're at and where we're headed with zoning, when I talk about it being time to modernize and update the code, traditional zoning worked really well to keep really heavy industrial uses away from residential uses. And it looked like something like that top left picture with the residential, industrial, and commercial uses really separately defined and contained. So the other images here are from all around Tigard. So at the top right, we have like an auto, like vehicle uses and self-storage. Bottom right, we have fought steel, a really heavy industrial use. And bottom left, we have some general commercial, box grocery, restaurant, that kind of thing for our general commercial. So this is generally what our neighborhoods have looked like for a really long time. But as I'm sure all of you guys know too, today a lot of uses are blurring those traditional definitions and mixing without impacts. So of course, really heavy industrial uses like fought steel will continue to stay separate, but there are a lot of opportunities to encourage more mixing. So for example, today we see uses like breweries, which we usually consider industrial uses, tasting rooms and dog adoption centers, which we consider commercial uses, all functioning within the same business and the same location, as shown with that eat, drink, adopt in the top right. At the bottom right, we have a makerspace, a very small scale manufacturer, often making goods on site and selling in the same location, with impacts primarily contained inside, and fewer deliveries than traditional heavy manufacturing. And I'm sure you guys are familiar, in some way with some or all of these trends, but just to give you an idea of the types of things that we're thinking about. At the bottom left, we have a project from the Tigard Triangle. So with apartments on top and retail on bottom, that traditional mixed use building. And but we're thinking about mixing more uses, not just within the same building, but kind of within the same area. So just a lot like opening up our use standards to allow more different types of uses to function near each other. So when we allow more of that mixing of uses, we're bringing more needs closer together, which also promotes walkability, as shown in the top left, a vision or image from our strategic plan. So next slide, please. Okay. The main tasks of this project will be looking at allowable uses and development standards throughout the city, with the focus of supporting a vibrant economy that is more socially equitable, environmentally sustainable, and connected by different modes of transportation, just to summarize these project objectives for you. Like I mentioned at the top of the presentation, we are still in the visioning stage for the project. So before we dig into making all these changes, we really want to hear from people like yourselves, what concerns you or excites you about the kinds of things that we're talking about, and are there opportunities to be considering that we're not looking at yet? So I do want to also touch on our community engagement efforts. Our plan for reaching out to the community so far has consisted of our engagement website, some online surveys for the community members and business owners, meetings and interviews with different stakeholder groups. So we've had a number of interviews with different developers and brokers through our builders, bankers, and brokers group. And we've had some phone interviews with business owners. And we've also recently presented to local business owners through the Tigard Chamber of Commerce. And we conducted a Spanish webinar a couple weeks ago with Adelante Mujeres with a follow-up discussion group that we're actually going to be having tonight for Spanish-speaking business owners to learn about and provide input on the project so that we can make sure we're really meeting the needs of local businesses. Next slide, please. So here's what this may look like. It should say this is what it may look like. So it's important to highlight we are still just in the brainstorming at this stage, so nothing's set just yet. But these are some of the things that we're thinking about so far that might be changing with MADE. So first and foremost, where uses can locate, we're really considering a lot more mixing together of uses, as we showed some of those uses that might be good to mix earlier in the presentation. Parking spaces. So sometimes a high parking, as you guys all I'm sure know, sometimes a high parking requirement can keep a business from being able to locate somewhere, even if it's technically allowed, since a site can't provide that number of parking spaces. So we may want that to change. Limits on building or tenant space size. So we're looking at the limits that we put on density, height, tenant space size, things like that to see how they can make the most sense. And then we're also looking at ways that we can encourage builders and developers to commit to more environmental sustainability and social equity with new projects. This will likely take the form of some sort of incentive structure, maybe like an incentive list or something like that that developers can choose from in exchange for things like added density or reduced parking requirements. And finally, we're also looking at improved resources at our planning counter. How can we better assist businesses and developers when you guys come into the city with a question? So these are just some of the things that we're thinking about so far. But again, I want to stress that we're really looking for input at this stage still. So any big red flags you see so far with our thinking or opportunities that you would like to hear more about that maybe I haven't mentioned, we really want to hear from those from you guys about those today. And that's all I got today for you. Thank you, Lloyd, for helping. And I don't know, Lloyd, if you want to say hello and add to that, because I am working really closely with Lloyd on this project. So he has had a big part in what we're thinking about right now, too.
Yeah, I think that would be a Lloyd.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I would echo Hope's statement that if you have some thoughts, either share them now or let us know to follow up with you, because we are absolutely in the creative thinking phase of this project. But we're excited to be bringing on a professional consulting team to help round out our internal team.
Yeah, I would throw in just a couple of things. One of the impetus for this project for several years now. I've been with Tigard for almost 10 years, and we've continually had frustrations with several of the industrial zones. That's property owners and developer frustrations, but also city personnel frustrations, because they're just really kind of outdated, and they're very limiting, and even some things that we would like to see happen in the city are being prevented or having to go through a lot of hoops. So this is something that we internally have wanted to get going for quite a long time. And then the other thing, just a technical thing, Hope didn't mention it, but when we do something like this in the state of Oregon, similar to when we do housing, we have to do a buildable lands inventory and other housing study needs analysis. We have to do an economic opportunity analysis, and we just hired a consultant team, and they are going to start that economic opportunity analysis, and we expect to have, it's going to be 2 parts. We expect to have the first part, which will be the traditional analysis, done probably by the end of June. And then in the second phase, we're going to keep that consultant team around, and we're going to have them review our draft codes and zoning, and just kind of give it a shakedown and give us feedback on what's working, what's not working, what things can we change or tweak to make it better. So just wanted to throw that in there so that you're aware that that's also going on. So yeah, so now I think we can throw it open to questions. Roseanne.
Hi there again. Can you just clarify, is there any residential component allowed in any of these, those red areas that you showed on the map?
Currently, in some of those areas, there is residential allowed. So we are looking at ways that it could be maybe allowed as a secondary use in some of those other like lighter industrial or mixed use zones. But again, with the focus, the focus is on employment land. So we're keeping the employment focus, but looking at ways that residential could be one of those uses that's allowed to mix in there.
Awesome. We love to hear that. So then my follow-up question and comment is, would the city consider a vertical housing development zone in those areas that allow for mixed use? I'm sure that the planners out there are familiar with that, but for those who aren't, it's, you know, commercial on the bottom and then each additional floor of residential on top can be unit equalized to allow for partial tax abatement. It can really make it pencil for the developer. So I would highly encourage that if you haven't already. You might have already though. And then secondly, wherever those mixed use spaces can be envisioned, I think, you know, having the density allowances be, you know, definitely over 25, you know, maybe even pushing 40 or 50 dwelling units per acre is really where we find that those mixed use developments can actually start penciling. Clackamas County is going through this exercise as well for their McLaughlin corridor, and how many dwelling units per acre to allow. They're considering not having a max, or maybe having it around 50.
Roseanne,
Thank you. That's really valuable. Oh, go ahead, Lloyd.
We actually have two vertical housing development zones already in the city. So we know that, as you mentioned, we know that's a good tool, and we'll keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually, that building, that 4/1 building that Hope had in her slide presentation, took advantage of that in the triangle. So we're seeing a lot of development of that type happening in the triangle. It really happened quickly, so it was encouraging to see. Yeah, and actually the team, we took a tour of the Central East Side in Portland yesterday. It was a beautiful day in the sun, walking through that area, and we got to see, you know, how a lot of kind of even traditional industrial small manufacturing types and commercial and retail and housing are all fitting together pretty nicely. Again, sort of like Susan's comparison to the Pearl District, I don't think we're going to be able, we're not going to, you know, we won't have that dense grid, transportation grid there in Tigard necessarily, but the main thing we're looking at is just what uses are compatible. Anybody else have any questions? One of the things we're excited about the consultant team is that they have in addition to their economists for the employment opportunities analysis, they have a sub-consultant development firm that has done a lot of commercial industrial development throughout the Portland region on the team. And so we're looking forward to that, to really test our draft zoning and code. So we're looking forward to that.
Actually, Tom, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I might be a little too simplistic, but it sounds like the primary purpose of this is to allow future flexibility, right? To allow for some of the changes that our changing economy and changing business picture looks like. And so the purpose of hiring the consultant and to help with the transition is just to come up with the language in the code that will be consistent with what the vision is. Is that the purpose of the consultant?
Well, I'll answer that, Hope. I think it's more real world testing to make sure it works. That's really what we're after. We don't want to come up with a code that all the planners think is great and cutting edge, and this is the thing that's going to happen, and then sort of similar to the Washington Square plan that sat for 20 years and nothing happened. We don't want that to happen. So we want to make sure that the codes and zoning development standards and things that we're developing are actually going to work.
Right.
And the things that we want. And I would add one other aspect to this. Tigard, you saw the map. A lot of that red area is commercial. The city of Tigard is pretty landlocked. We're looking at a little bit of limited additions of employment lands in River Terrace that Skylar was talking about, but that area out there is really topographically challenged and not a great place for extensive employment lands. So we have very limited employment land. Pretty much all of it is developed. We don't have any green fields, so we're looking at a lot of redevelopment. And a lot of the uses that we have now in our current industrial lands are kind of highly industrial laydown areas, giant warehouses full of, wallboard. They're businesses that aren't high in employment density. So we're also looking to try to improve and increase our employment density in the industrial areas that we have.
Makes sense.
Other questions? So Hope, I'm going to ask you, did you, I can't remember from your presentation, did you talk about your schedule? Maybe you could just do a quick kind of where we're at, what's coming, and what some of the major points in the schedule are.
Yeah, so right now, I think we're pretty much wrapping up our first round of like in-depth community engagement. So incorporating that feedback into discussion. So okay, so where we're at right now is we've done that. We just we're in the process of hiring on our EOA consultant. So they will be completing that economic opportunities analysis document by end of June. And then doing their phase 2 of their work through the second half of this year, which will be, so while they're completing the EOA up until June, Lloyd, Tom, and myself are currently developing some language for those new potential zoning designations. So use categories, use standards, development standards, incentives lists. We'll be building that out until around the end of June. So around beginning of July, the consultant will be doing that analysis of our proposed zoning that Tom talked about. So looking to see if it actually makes sense, what the potential impacts of in implementing that zoning would look like. And then about the end of the year, we should have those ready and start with adoption. So actually presenting those to Planning Commission and City Council beginning of next year. Tom, does that sound right? Okay.
Yes, that sounds right. Okay, any other questions? Lloyd, did you have any final? Okay. All right, thanks you guys. Okay, so that concludes our formal presentations. You can see that we are, in fact, despite the COVID, very busy and moving forward with a lot of projects. Susan mentioned we also have the transportation system plan update. We've got there's a few other things in the works as well. So, and as usual, as we move forward, I think we'll probably get back to maybe our quarterly schedule with this committee. As we have, new information, we want to make sure we have new information to bring to you, and make sure we want to come to you when we have moments in our projects where we would value your feedback. At this point, I will open it up to committee members. Do you have particular issues or questions or things just in general? We've done this in the past where you've brought up topic ideas or particular issues or items of interest that are that you're running into out there in your day-to-day work.
So I've got my soapbox that I've been on lately, that I would encourage you to stay with virtual meetings for neighborhood meetings, for development applications. They are a great way to get out to a nice broad audience, and you can avoid some of the mob mentality that you sometimes get when you've got everybody in a single room. So they're actually very effective at calmly communicating information out to people, and the logistics are much easier in several regards. Not trying to find miscellaneous public spaces to have meetings and things like that. So I was a little skeptical at first of how they were going to work, but they've proven to be quite good.
Okay, thanks. That's good feedback. I've heard some things from the planners as well that as frustrating as it's been, and as tough as it's been to kind of scramble or rethink and redo everything, that there's been some unexpected good benefits too that have come out of it. So appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other topic?
Yeah, I would support that as well. Just to make one other comment about Zoom. When we would do our homeowner association turnover meetings, we would regularly see in a neighborhood of, let's say there's 30 homes in it, we'd see 10 people show up. Or we get a third to 25% of the homeowners show up for an association meeting, and with Zoom, it's almost 100%, which is fabulous because everybody's there. Everybody gets to hear about their community and all the different spaces. And I just think there's more of a willingness to attend and hear about everything and be educated. So I think that's a great point, Mimi. I would support that as well.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any comments or issues? Okay. Oh, there's one raised hand. Who is that? Oh, Roseanne.
It's me again. Because we're going through some internal transitions with our Home Builders Association and liaison assignments, I forgive the naivete with this question if it's already been addressed. With respect to House Bill 2306, which is the infrastructure building permit issuance at substantial completion, has Tigard been addressing that already, or are you familiar with this?
I don't have it memorized by the numbers.
Okay, so it requires cities and counties to issue building permits upon substantial completion of the public improvements. So the infrastructure, all the main categories of infrastructure. The roads just need to be able to be accessed by emergency vehicles. They don't have to have the top lift of pavement or anything. So, but the water all in, fire hydrants all in, sewer all in, all the backbone in. And then, the plat might not be completely signed off yet, but the building permits themselves have already been intaken and are going through review, interdepartmental review. And then once that substantial completion meets the acceptance levels that the city deems acceptable per their codes, then they can issue those building permits and allow for the construction to be started, maybe while some final punch list items are being finished with the plat.
And I'm sorry to close but is that a bill that has already passed, or is that one in session now?
Yeah, it was passed in 2019. I think with the COVID year, it fell off of a lot of jurisdictional plates, if you will.
Well, obviously, I haven't heard internal discussions about that. A lot of that decision comes out of our engineering department because they issue the PFI permits. I know generally we like to have everything done before we issue permits. That's been our practice. So I will circle back with our city attorney and our city engineer, and we'll find out where they're at with that.
Thank you. We would really appreciate that.
And maybe I haven't heard of it because we could be already in compliance. So that's often the case. Any other questions, folks?
So you updated your residential development standards pretty substantially a couple of years ago, I think.
Yeah, November 2018.
How's that going? Are you any tweaks you're going to do to that in the near future, or is it working perfectly?
It's working almost perfectly, I would say.
Good.
We've made a couple of tweaks just a year or two ago. I think it was just over a year ago, because we were watching the HB 2001, the missing middle housing for the state. We kind of anticipated that, and that's what we anticipated that what we had passed was going to meet the requirements of HB 2001. So then we had to follow the rulemaking. And so we've been following that in the model ordinance, and we think we are in compliance with that. So we will be making our pitch to DLCD that we are already in compliance. So I'm not anticipating too many or any more changes for that. Skylar's still with us. We're always thinking of ways to improve things. So we might have a few tweaks here and there. He mentioned some broadening out of quad. Ability to do quads in River Terrace 2.0, and so we'll be looking. If you have thoughts or ideas, we're open to that. But we're always looking to improve our regulations.
We ran into a microscopic issue on a recent multifamily project, in that it appears the code doesn't allow chain link fence at all, and there's just some applications that chain link makes sense and a wood screen fence doesn't. So I was like, stormwater facilities, we can't put chain link around a stormwater facility. And that's the Clean Water Services standard. So you've made the adjustment process much easier. So that is very helpful. But I think you might want to make sure that we can at least use chain link around storm facilities. And in our situation, it was at the top of a retaining wall, and that's a situation where you don't necessarily want the wind throw, but you do want the fall protection. So there's just situations that really is a preferable option.
Okay. Well, I know we have a city engineer that is very interested and quite an advocate for not having fences if we can get away with it, and and I know it's all a matter of how much space do you have enough space to cut down the slopes so that you don't need retaining walls, and there's a lot that goes into it. So that was kind of the policy choice that was made, was to not have them. But if there are situations where you have a site that's really constrained and you need it because you have to do retaining walls, then we have the adjustment option, that valve. So I can bring it up, but
yeah,
letting you know what the policy situation is here. So
sure.
Any other issues? Okay, Kenny, did you have anything to add? We're wrapping up.
No, thanks, Tom. Great meeting. Thanks to all of the committee members. And long meeting, so let's get out of here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a beautiful afternoon out there. Okay,
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.